scene ends, it's like someone yelled fire. And they can't, you know, the keyboards have steam coming off them because they're typing so fast. But, so that brings us back to the snowblowers in Miami. Because you got to come back to where you started, right? So I think it's fair to say that how they got there the first time could have been an innocent mistake. You know, someone legitimately could have made a mistake and sent snowblowers to Miami. What's not understandable is how this happened 30 years. I mean, that's just crazy. And so I think that I really believe the fact that the people who were there weren't bad. They weren't, you know, malintentioned, but they just didn't have their head in the game. It wasn't a fight that was worth fighting. And so they didn't raise their hand, they didn't raise questions, and it was just easier to let it go. And that's how they got back there 30 times. And I think fundamentally, it's because they weren't engaged. So this is sort of what engagement looks like. I don't know who actually they're looking at, but it might be, you know, someone like Larry David, who, by the way, is going to be on SNL Saturday night, if you didn't know, as Bernie Sanders, which that's hilarious. But whoever is on the stage, these guys are clearly engaged. And I think it's critical for people to be engaged, because when people are engaged, everything goes back to where it should be. So the snowblower is in Minnesota, shoveling snow, and Miami Beach is Miami Beach, where you can lay out and read a book and rub some suntan lotion on yourself. Thank you very much. Yes.
Excellent presentation. Appreciate very much what you shared with us. It comes from the life expert. Now you had just mentioned real estate, gentlemen, and you are in used cars business. So I have a quotation. I used to be a software salesman. I owned a technology company that later on I sold to American Express. So the difference between a used car salesman and a software salesman is that the used car salesman knows when he's lying. I sold software and I will talk about the capacity that I don't know if it could do or not do, because Microsoft will pull a plug one day and it's not there anymore. So, the question for you is, you know, you talk about trusting employees, and which is, we do. But there are things that you see and you observe that sort of, you know, I'm at a loss as a CEO if they are valued or not valued. For example, I have an employee and she works part-time, and she has a tendency to take an hour, oh, I'm late because something broke on my car, or I have to go to the court because I have this ticket. And it happens, and we have sick days and personal days for that, but I never see her taking those. And it's a 2 hour here, 3 hour there, and the time goes, and I don't count it. But to me, it looks like it's not fair, there's only one way. So what are your thoughts on something like that?
Well, obviously I don't know the specifics of the situation, but you know, there are companies now that have done away with sick time and vacation time, and I don't remember the name of the company. I just read an article literally this weekend about a very progressive company like a Netflix. Oh, I think it was Netflix actually. There was an article that I just read. It was actually about Netflix, their corporate culture. It was written by the woman who was the head of HR for Netflix. She created this manifesto of how do we build a culture for employees. And one of the interesting things about this manifesto that she wrote is we're going to treat people like adults. We're not going to tell them they have sick days, vacation days. You do your job. You show up when you have to show up. And if you do your job and everything's fine, we're not going to be upset. It's a mature, it's not for the faint-hearted to do that. But I think in your case, if someone's actually meticulously managing their time, that says to me other things, that she's more worried about clocking in and clocking out. Maybe sometimes she stays late, but if she doesn't. So
kids at home.
Yeah, well, everybody has obligations, and maybe this job may be not the right fit for her. If she cannot be there when you need her all the time, and there's no way around that for her, and you you don't have the flexibility to allow her to work from home or do some other things, depending upon what the job is, it may just be a bad fit.
Thank you.
Yes. Oh, wait, can we just get the microphone? Sorry.
Great speech. When I was at Chase 20 years ago, we were very big on customer satisfaction and employee satisfaction. And we sat down with the president of the bank at the time. I was on the consumer side. And he said, that's great. I like them to be happy, my employees. But how much money should we spend on it? And we at that time tried to find evidence that if employees are happy, customers are happy, and eventually the shareholders are happy, because that's what he cared about. That was 20 years ago. In your book, have you found more evidence that those things actually do happen? We found only anecdotal evidence at that time.
Well, that's a great question. I think that I do have a couple of stories in the book that relate to that, but more broadly, one of the things that I've come to realize is that money, because you mentioned pay, money is not, in most cases, the largest determinant of employee satisfaction. I mean, assuming you're paying people
But
fairly-
even an offsite. Offsite was great for morale, and we spent a lot of money on offsites. And they said, well, do we need to go to Palm Springs
Right.
in the winter?
So the problem with that is when you come back on site, you don't do anything you discussed at the offsite. It was just a one-off little fling. How many companies, and I see this all the time, you walk into every company, and when you walk through the main door, there's either a big plaque or a poster of our corporate values, right? And they're all amazing. You know, it makes you want to cry. And you know, if the companies actually did that, if they actually acted on those values, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So when I talk to employees, when I get them into small groups, one woman actually said to me, I said, what's wrong with your company? And she said to me, come with me. She took me outside and she said, you see this wall? I said, yes. She said, we don't do any of this. That's what's wrong with the company. And it was such a graphic way of expressing it. So, in fact, having that on the wall, it would be better not to have it on the wall. It would be better to have a blank wall. You do nothing. Because if you say you do something and you do the opposite, that's actually worse. That's really annoying. And so I think a lot of this stuff, which occurred to me when I was writing this book, is, well, you know, this stuff seems pretty obvious. Why am I writing a book about it? And then I realized it is obvious, but no one's doing it. That's why you have to write a book. Because a lot of this stuff doesn't take time. These principles do not take a lot of time to implement. They cost very little, if any, money to do. And yet people don't do it. And because sometimes I think people look for a new shiny object, like going to an off-site meeting or something, or giving someone, you know, a paperweight or a loose-site block or a nice briefcase or something that's, you know, a token of our great meeting. And then it's business as usual. Thank you for the question. Yes?
Two things. The first thing I want to point out is the snow blowers. The snow blowers is a very interesting problem. It was done probably 30 years ago when the idea of stocking a company was universal stocking. This is what you started out with, this is seasonal, and it was across the board. The drugstores did it, the clothing stores did it, and nobody ever wanted to change it because that's the way we did things. So that was that. But the other thing you pointed out about Kodak, Kodak did invent the digital camera. Kodak was the first to invent the digital camera in the 70s, and they buried it. And they buried it because they were able to see right away that this was their demise. They were not going to be able to survive in that atmosphere, and basically, for the most part, it destroyed the film business. And Kodak was in the film business, not the camera business, the film business. And they realized that they gained another 20 years or so of productivity in being around before they finally closed their doors. If they would have released the digital camera sooner, they would have probably gone out of business sooner. So sometimes you can find the answer, and it may be a better answer, but it ain't your answer. I think that was the corporate decision they made.
Well, I mean, you're clearly right in terms of what happened. I think another way to think about it, perhaps, is that if they thought of themselves as being in the imaging business, as opposed to the film business, you know, I don't know how it would have turned out, but you know, you contrast that with what Reed Hastings did at Netflix, because he basically had the same issue, right? Streaming was to DVDs what digital photography was to film. And I'm a photographer, I take lots of pictures, and my friend Mitchell in the back is a professional photographer. I'm not a professional photographer, but I mean, I still have tons of carousel trays of photographic images, which I'm slowly digitizing, because I want to be able to see them. So I don't know what would have happened, but they took the easy way out. And yes, they bought themselves 20 years, but who knows if they couldn't have become a vibrant company today with film for professional, you know, moviegoers, movie makers, but owning the digital business.
But look at Xerox. Xerox went the other way, and they're also in big trouble because the product that they're having can't sustain itself in the form that it's in.
Exactly.
And as far as your pictures are concerned, I still like a photograph better because you have it. The digital stuff is in libraries, on computers, and nobody ever goes back and looks at it. And when the computer goes, there goes your family history.
No, I agree.
It's really funny that sometimes we're in such a rush to keep up with the latest thing that we forget. And one more point that I want to make also, you talked about the business climate of always changing and cutting back, and what's happening with the corporate people of making more and more profit to go to the stockholders, and the whole concept of taking care of your employees has gone out the window. And we have the pretty words, and we say we want to get more participation, we want to give them more control. First of all, most employees can't do the control that's needed, and you can't get the employees. It's very difficult today to hire a 20-something or a 30-something that wants to work. It isn't a question of what you do. They don't want to work. They think they're entitled to everything. And the traditional businesses that still employ people are, yes, they're the backwash, but that's the backbone of the country. And once you get rid of that, where is the employment going to come from? I mean, Amazon is phenomenal, but look how many people it puts out. And, you know, we're in this problem right now, figuring out what to do with people, and I'll shut up now.
Yes.
With regard to Kodak and Xerox, I often think that in branding, it comes down to what you tell people you are, so that if they had said, we are digital rather than film, people would have bought that story. So it's what you can sell yourself as. So if you sell yourself as this type of product, people believe you are this type of product. So it's not a matter of what you really are, it's what you sell your brand as. So it's not necessarily they were a film product. If you sell yourself as this type of brand, you are this type of brand. So they could have gone the other way, in my opinion. It's just that they didn't hold themselves out to be that.
Right.
You know, people will buy what they see you are. So
Yes. Yes, sir.
So I'm a partner in professional services firm, and our business really has not changed, probably since CPA firms were invented. But the young people coming into the practice have changed dramatically. Our clients' demands have changed dramatically. They now expect something in a day or two, where before you could deliver something in a week or 10 days. We're struggling, even though we have engaged in the of getting the right productivity out of the team. We tell them what our expectations are. We tell them that they have to come up with 1,650 billable hours a year. But we have a problem with them producing timely the work product we need. I want to hear your comments about how we can get what we need out of a younger generation of employees to meet our clients' needs.
Well, I'm not sure I have a great answer for you. I will tell you that I have a 35-year-old daughter who's a director of an advertising agency business. And lately what she says to me is, Dad, oh, those millennials, I can't stand them. So, I mean, you and I are sort of more, the same cohort group, but here's someone who's 35, who's talking about them in much harsher terms than what you're expressing. Because she's only 10 years older than they are in some cases. And she's beyond frustrated. She asks me, what should I do? I said, well, smack them. But, I mean, the issue is that they do have very different expectations. And we collectively have to figure out how to engage them because they are the largest group of people in the workforce today. It will become the largest group in absolute terms of the workforce. So if we don't figure out how to engage them, we have a very big problem. And I think that I don't have like a great answer, but I think the one answer that I have is what worked for all of us doesn't work for them. So we need a new cookbook. We need to find out what are the right triggers, what are the hot buttons that will get them engaged. Because I don't think because they're 23, they're unable, they're engaged in a lot of things that happen not to be related to work, right? So they're engaged with Facebook, they're engaged with lots of other things. So I think the challenge for us is to figure out how do we engage them in doing work, because at some point, they are going to have to pay for all the toys and things they want to have. The practical reality of you have to pay rent, you have to buy food, you want to go to the club, they're going to need money, and unless they do something else, you need to work to get money. So I think, I'm not trying to be, silly about it, but I think there's a code that needs to be cracked, which I don't believe anyone's yet cracked, to really figure out how to get inside what's on their mind and engage them.
And what's even harder for professional service firms is what's even harder for professional service firms, we're looking for the next level of partners that are going to succeed at something. And I want my money out of the deal. And with the millennials, when I started to practice, my goal was to become a partner in the firm. Well, I'm a partner in the firm. But you talk to a lot of these kids, they don't want the responsibility, they don't want anything that goes along with that.
No.
And I want to retire someday. I don't want to work till the day I die. Right now, we have no succession plan because of that.
Right. Yes.
The only comment I make, I hire maintenance. I do hire maintenance all the time. I have one working right now. And the only thing that seems to work is I give them ownership of the project. This is your project. This is the result I'm looking for. Go do it. And then I have to live up with their texting during the day 30 times and being off to lunch for 2 hours. That's something I live with. There's nothing I can do.
The real question is when they come back, when they come back with the work you ask them to do,
Sometimes.
if it's good work,
Sometimes. Okay, so as someone born in 1983, I feel the need to. But it's kind of hard when I agree with a lot of what they said.
I would say the other thing that's changed beyond, work habits, which I think the people who came through depression would tell the boomers that they were lazy and that's never going to change. The tenure, right? I noticed anecdotally with people I came out of college with, being with the company for 2 years is like a huge deal versus the 30 years you mentioned. So I'd be interested, sort of a two-sided equation. It takes so long to get up a learning curve, and then you finally learn how to do a job, and with the internet, with the availability of recruiting, it's like people constantly have one foot out the door, so I'd just be interested in your thoughts there. I got so many congratulations for my 6th year at Goldman Sachs, who would have thought there was a 3 in front.
well, that's interesting because I think that, so you're at Goldman Sachs, so most of the major firms, banks, law firms, consulting firms, professional service firms, have a clear track. But even Goldman's changing the way they think about making partners, and things of that nature, because they realize that, people are realizing that the brass ring that everybody works so hard for is maybe not that good. I have my son's best friend went to NYU Law School, was on law review, interned with a great firm, got a job. It was in, M&A work. And when he started, he knew exactly what he was getting into. And he and my son would be out cavorting, doing it. He'd get a text at 3 o'clock in the morning, be in the office at 7 a.m., we have a deal. You know, and he had to go home and read the document so he was ready to go. And he did this, he was being paid a ton of money for a 25-year-old who didn't know anything. And he was working literally over 100 hours a week. After a year, he said, I'm done. He had a girlfriend. They decided to quit their jobs. They moved out to California with a dog that they bought. And they didn't have jobs. And they just said, we'll figure it out. We want to have a life. And, you know, and one of the reasons I'm very close to this kid, and I said, well, he said, I looked at the partner, and he does the same thing as I do. He just makes $1 million a year versus what I do. But he's on the same clock. And he said, I don't want that. So he's a smart kid. He works hard. This didn't do it for him. Now he's doing something else in real estate development that he's loving. He's working hard, but he doesn't feel like he's on the treadmill. His wife is working for Legal Aid in Santa Barbara. They have 2 dogs now. They got married. They're happy. I went to the wedding last spring. So it's not what he thought he was signing up for, but he's happy. And he would have been miserable had he stayed. So I think for some people, they're making, I never would have considered that. You know, that would have been so far out of my realm of thinking. And my father probably would have smacked me, someone else would have smacked me, but it didn't even enter my mind. You know, so I think part of the issue is they're dealing with a different reality. And we have to acknowledge that reality and say, okay, for those who do want to play, for those who are working in your firm, right, as opposed to the one who left, we've got to find a way to get them engaged to sort of work their way up. But it's a real issue. Yeah, I'm sorry.
You brought a few great examples of failures like Kodaman, Eastman Kodak, or Xerox and Kodak, companies that did not reinvent themselves. And Netflix is a great example. I'm a heavy shareholder. AOL is a disaster. Yahoo is a disaster. Amazon managed to reinvent itself from books to everything and content. In your book, have you thought about who succeeded and why versus who has not? Would Amex reinvent itself? Question mark.
Well, you know, I haven't been there in a long time, but I would say that Amex suffers from the inertia syndrome.
Is this my product?
Well, you know, you would say to yourself, why didn't Amex invent PayPal? Why didn't you know, all these mobile payment applications? That's their business, right? So, because they were comfortable, you know, they were, you know, riding on their success. I think there are realistically more. I think most companies are treading water. And I used to swim, and after these practices, we would have these practices, and the coach would, and we were exhausted, even though we were young and fit. The coach would say after these exhaustive practices, I want you to do 30 laps, an Olympic-sized pool. So we do the laps, and then we thought we were finally done, and then he would say, I'll never forget this, he said, now I want you to tread water for 20 minutes. That's the hardest thing to do. And the point he was making is you can't tread water for 20 minutes. Either you have to swim to the side of the pool or you drown. You know, and the significance of that is that these companies that are treading water, they've got to go one way or the other. You know, Xerox is splitting itself up, as you know, right? They just announced that. Yahoo is going to split itself up or be bought. I mean, they just don't know what to do. They've run out of options. And so I think there are companies that are very successful, and I think those companies still tend to be dominated by the founders. So you look at Charles Schwab, you look at FedEx, where Fred Smith is still there. You look at Amazon, where Bezos is still there. You look at Virgin, where Branson's still there. Even though these guys are multi-billionaires and they're 25 years from when they started the company, they still have their fingerprints on the business, which I think is easier to do when you're a founder. When you're just a professional manager, I think it's a little harder to have that same passion. And so I think, therefore, it's easier to let this virus infect you where you are not engaged and you're not asking the tough questions. Yes, you had a question, Dr. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just, actually, I think you gave, I own a law firm, and I think you actually gave us the answer in your speech, in that I think we need to speak to the younger people. Speak to the younger people and ask them, you know, because people want a life-work balance. It's not that they don't want to work, it's just whatever's happening is not the way we look at it. So maybe we need to ask them, what would make it, like, you need to get X work done. What is the environment that's going to make you happy so that we can get that work done? And then again, you were saying you want the life-work balance at the end of the day. You want a life at the end of the day. I had the privilege of being in Facebook. I went inside Facebook. It is another world. It is a city unto itself. There are giant warehouses where these kids work in open spaces. There are open restaurants. Not to say that's what we're going to do in our professional, but it's a different culture. But they are working their butts off all day long. And I said, because I was taken around by somebody in the legal department, I said, what happens when they don't do their job? Like, how do you fire people? Just like was addressed before. And they said, well, they don't do their work. It's not a good fit, and they're just asked to leave. It's like a really simple transition, and that's it. So either you fit in, or you don't. And great, you need the work done, but happy employees, you know, and ask them what they want. Maybe that will help.
You know, that's a great example, and you know, those people are engaged.
Right, very.
And it's not just measured by the number of hours they work. It's the nature of what they do in each hour, right? Because they're given very clear objectives and projects to do, and they don't want to let the team down. I mean, they know they're part of this gigantic octopus, and what they're working on is minuscule relative to all of Facebook. They don't think about it that way. You know, it's the old when there was a famous quote when Kennedy announced the plan to put a man on the moon, and he went to Houston. He asked the janitor, "What's your job here?" He said, "My job is to help put a man on the moon." You know, he didn't think of himself as a janitor. He thought of himself, I'm indispensable to this mission. And I think the Facebook people are more like that. Of course, in the case of Facebook, you know, Zuckerberg is 30. But he was smart enough to bring in Sheryl Sandberg, who's not, who somehow figured out how to connect with them. So whatever it is they did, that's a great example you wrote. Whatever it is they're doing, someone's figuring it out. I mean, it's not insoluble.
That's not a good example because these people live Facebook and they work Facebook as their main, and it's a very small population as opposed to mainstream America where you can't have open restaurant, you can't have roller skating to the. I have a partner who is a manager at Google. I invited him for dinner. I would say a sentence and he'll say, "What did you say?" We're sitting face to face. And he's blanked out. This is the level of attention in these companies, and you know, and they're also getting stock options.
Yes.
I mean, each one of them is probably a millionaire,
Sure.
which we can afford to make our employees in overnight activity. So it's a different world, you know, and only a small section,
No, that's
which I don't think can be applied to the.
No, that's a good point. Yes.
I think that we're missing a point, talking about new companies and older companies. Companies, by nature, are set up to do a specific thing, and they're set up to do it in a specific way. A&S is set up to sell goods. American Express has their way of doing it. These companies, Kodak, Xerox, they can't abandon their company and, you know, Kodak has, you know, 10,000 employees making film, laboratories developing it, all that stuff that goes with it. You can't just say, you know what, let's chuck it all in, we'll go digital, okay? And we'll create that market. It's not the right mindset. The people who were hired by Kodak were hired to promote Kodak. And they think in those terms, the same as most small businesses think in those terms. New businesses like Amazon, where, or Facebook, they're new, they're into it, they're wiggling, they're jiggling, they don't have big infrastructure, they can do that kind of stuff. Your business has experienced most of those. They can't change around and say, the used car business, now let's go, we're gonna rent self-driving vehicles instead of cars, because we know that in 10 years, the car industry is gonna go down the tubes. So they're not doing that.
So let me respond and also say that we have time for about 2 or 3 more questions. I would argue with you about reinventing. I'll tell you why. This used car business that we bought is 25 years old, and it's a very good business, but it really hasn't changed much since we bought it from the founder. In the 6 months we've had it, we've changed it dramatically. One of the things,
But you bought it from the founder and you've changed it.
no, I understand,
The
but
founder hasn't
I
changed.
understand that, but it's still an old business. I'm talking about the nature of the business. We're going to, by the end of the year, sell used cars online. We're going to, that's unheard of.
It's not
We're
novel.
going- Well, what I'm saying is, even though they wouldn't have done it, we are doing it, but the business is the same business. So that's why, that's the whole point of Fresh Eyes. You could say that we have Fresh Eyes because we're the new owners. I would submit that existing owners, like perhaps with your professional services firm, maybe the way to think about this is, if you were to buy your firm today, what would you do differently than you're doing today? Which is a different way of thinking than the way, in other words, if I bought your firm, just for the purpose of the conversation, if I bought your firm, I would be looking at it not to think about it in the context of the issues you're describing, but what could I do with the firm going forward that would make it more attractive? But you don't have to wait for someone to buy it or bring in a consultant. If you think about it that way, you may come up with some insights as to how you might do some things differently.
How many firms today, big firms today, have been able to reinvent themselves as like an Amazon or as a Facebook, or not very many. The car industry did because they crashed to the ground.
Not many.
Then you die. You either reinvent yourself or you die.
Right.
Look at the Dow 100 years ago, and how many are alive?
Let me take a question to that, just to be fair.
I think it boils down, in many cases, to technology. It's utilizing technology. We don't need any stores, and we don't need any almost restaurants. We just need, the people that seem to be doing very well are utilizing this new technology, which is really just the web, the internet, and they're making business, selling cars, selling accounting services, selling everything without a back office or a little back office that can be anywhere. It's utilizing, taking advantage of technology, it seems to me.
Well, that's right, but sometimes when that's expressed that way, it's expressed as, technology is sort of evil. It's the evil.
good way.
But let's take an example that's happening right here. 2 years ago, a medallion for a yellow kit was $1.4 million. Today it's $400,000. And the reason is one word, Uber. Now there are people who have financed 50 medallions with bank loans. They're not in a good place right now. And, for the taxi industry to have been blind to this, they're sort of getting what they deserve. I'm not taking a side on this, but I was in Paris last summer. This is really amazing. And we were in a taxi. And I said to them, how do you feel about Uber here in Paris? And he says, oh, we hate Uber. And I said, why do you hate Uber? He said, well, blah, blah, blah. He says all that stuff. So I said, could you be an Uber driver? He said, I could be an Uber driver. I said, would you make more or less money as an Uber driver? I would make more money as an Uber driver, he told me. I said, so why don't you become an Uber driver? And his answer was, because I hate Uber. Okay, now, my feeling about that is, well, that's your problem, but, you have an opportunity to to do something, and you're choosing not to on, in this case, principle. But
You made my point to me. You made my point just there. The taxi industry was not blindsided. They couldn't change. They can't take their $50 million loan and throw it away and go Uber for $2. Oh, I took a buy here, it was $5 from Penn Station to here,
Right.
no tip, no nothing. A cab that'll be $20.
Well, but
You
it is
can't.
what it is. I
Yeah,
mean, the
and that's why
reality
you're
is,
humble.
you're either gonna have to figure out how to make money as a taxi owner, or you're gonna have to find a new business.
Right.
Because, I mean, it's very Darwinian, right? But that's, I mean,
But
that's
you
my,
can't make money as a taxi owner, so
Well,
it's gonna go down.
I don't
Just like
like taxi
Kodak.
owners.
Other countries have outlawed
Yes.
Uber.
Well, yeah, it'll pass through, it's just a matter of time, the delay in that.
Marty, we haven't talked about the economics in CEO compensation. And it appears to me, the way that we compensate CEOs and what we expect out of them, that they're not the founders, they're not the innovators. They're the ones that are causing the pivot not to happen. But yet CEO compensation keeps rising and rising and rising, where there's no connection between a synergistic view of a company rather than silos. I want to hear your comments about how this should change and how it can change.
well, you ask good questions. I should say you ask hard questions. You know, having sat on a number of comm committees, and still on them, there's a big problem. The problem is there are 3 or 4 consulting firms who do compensation surveys. And if you're a public company, you have to identify your peer group of who you compete against. And those companies, their CEO's compensation, create an index that would be analogous to, let's say, your company. And so the discussion goes something like this. Well, you know, Charlie had a reasonably good year, wasn't great, but the group's comp went up 12%, and if we don't give Charlie a 12% bump, he's going to wind up working for one of those guys. My answer to that is maybe that would be good, right? And so, of course, what's going on across the street in that office is they're talking about Fred over here, and it's a bit incestuous, right? And so so that's one part of it. That's the mechanical part of the problem. The other part of the problem is the absolute numbers themselves are huge. So if and I didn't make this, but if I made $20 million last year, and this year they want to give me a signal that I didn't have such a good year and they pay me $18 million, I'm going to be upset because I got $2 million less, but it's not like I'm worrying about my next meal. So when you get to a certain level of compensation, the relative differences between whether I make 15, 18, 14, 20, at some level of abstraction, it doesn't really matter, other than psychologically, right?
And your ego's kind.
And your ego, because there's a New York Times thing with the top payments, you know, if you want to be, it's something that I don't know how to solve. frankly. How about one more question?
Scared everybody.
We're done? Great. Thank you very much. Great question.